Hey folks, I wanted to do a quick review of how to identify inverted triads and how to label them. We have the root position triad. We've talked about the traditional nomenclature. So when we have that traditional nomenclature, if the root is on the bottom, we call it a 5-3, because when we're looking at the relationship between the notes in this triad, we have a fifth and then a third. So sometimes you'll see, it's really rare, but you might see E5-3. It's an E major triad and it's in root position. Most of the time we'll just see that labeled as E, but you could, if you wanted to be real fancy, put it as 5-3. Then when the third of the E major triad is on the bottom, that is called a 6-3. And the reason it's called 6-3 is because the relationship between the bottom note and the top note, they're a sixth apart and then a third apart. But the quality of the chord, it's still an E major triad, it's just not in root position. So we sometimes see that labeled as E6 or E6-3. Remember, E6-3 is like the real fancy way of saying it. E6 is what we'll see a little bit more commonly. Then our last one is 6-4. That is when the fifth of the triad is on the bottom. So here we have the B on the bottom of our triad. We have B, E, and G sharp. So the relationship, the reason we call it 6-4 is because the relationship between the top note and the bottom is a sixth apart and then a fourth apart. So that's why we call it 6-4. Now that one we'll always see 6-4 when we see it in that inversion. Now, that's our traditional nomenclature. We've also talked about our lead sheet way of labeling, and what we do there, that's when we just use the slash to say what note is in the bottom. Regular old E, let's change colors for this, just so that we can differentiate between them. So E is how we would label a root position triad in lead sheet notation. E/G sharp is how we would label an E major triad in first inversion, because the G sharp is in the bottom note. And then for our 6-4 or our second inversion, we would have E and we would put /B, because that lets us know that B is our bottom note. So that's what we would do. We also would have to indicate what the quality of the triad is. So if it were minor, let's take away this, let's make this a G natural. That would change the quality of our triad. So we would put E minor with a B in the base. So we still have to pay attention to quality when we do this. Okay, let me put that sharp back there. There we go. Okay, so let's do some practice. This is where the idea of stacking comes in, because we look at this and we go, okay, this is not a root position triad. I might be a little confused about which triad this is and what the quality is. So this is where we talk about stacking. We have two things that are together. We have C and E that are both on a space. Can we move the G to put it? Yes, now we have a stack. So we know that C is actually the root of our triad. So we have a perfect fifth between C and G, and then we have a major third between C and E. So we actually have a C major triad, but the fifth is on the bottom, which means we have a C6-4. Or if we're doing our lead sheet notation, we have a C with a G in the base. Okay, let's look at our next one. We have A flat and C and F. We know that we have close to a stack, we have A flat and C, and we can move that F to make a stack. So let's look at the quality of this triad. F to C, that is a perfect fifth, and then F to A flat, we have a minor third. So we have an F minor triad. So we have F minor, but we have A flat, which is the third of the triad on the bottom, which means we have a 6 or 6-3. Or if we're using that lead sheet notation, we have F minor, but with A flat in the bass. Let's look at our next one. We have C sharp, E sharp, and A. We can make a stack out of this by putting A on the bottom, which means we have A as our root. So we have A, B, C sharp, D sharp, nope, not D sharp, ding dong. There we go, and E. So A to E would be our perfect fifth, but we have A to E sharp. We have an augmented fifth and a major third, so we have an augmented triad. So we have an A augmented, and our third is in the bass, so that is an A augmented 6 or 6-3. And if we want to use lead sheet notation, that is A augmented with a C sharp in the bass. Let's look at our last one. Our last one, we have B flat, E, and G. We can make a stack in one of two ways. We could put E, G, B flat and keep them all on lines, or we could have E, G, and B flat and keep them all on spaces. They're both correct. They both let you know that E is the root of our triad. So if we have E as the root of our triad, normally in E major we have F sharp and C sharp and G sharp and D sharp. So we have a B flat. That's letting us know we have a lowered fifth. We have a diminished fifth and a minor third. So we have a diminished triad here. So we have E diminished, and this time our fifth, the fifth of the triad, is in the bottom note. So we have an E diminished 6-4, or in our lead sheet notation, we have E diminished with a B flat in the bass. Let's do a couple in bass clef. And here we go. We don't have a stack. We have C sharp, F sharp, and A sharp. We can make a stack out of that by bringing the C sharp up an octave. So we know F sharp is the root. And in F sharp major, almost everything is sharp except for the B. So we have F sharp, G sharp, A sharp. We should have an A sharp if it were a major. So we have a perfect fifth and a minor third. So we have a minor triad here. So let's see, we've got our F sharp minor triad, but our C sharp, our fifth, is in the bass. So that's going to be a 6-4. And that would be F sharp minor with C sharp in the bass. There's our lead sheet notation. This one looks like a stack. We just have a stack. So D is the root. We have D, F, and A. That's a perfect fifth and a minor third. We just have D minor. We don't have to do anything to that. Now, if we want to be real fancy, we could put 5-3 for our traditional notation. And if I'm asking you to create something, I would just put 5-3 if I wanted root position. Or I could write just D minor and you would assume that it's root position because I didn't indicate any other inversion. Okay, and our last one, we don't have a stack. Let's make a stack. We could do A, C, and E flat, or A, C, and E flat. Either one lets you know that A is our root. So now let's analyze the triad. We have A to E. Normally, we would have A to E, and that would be our perfect fifth. We have a diminished fifth and a minor third. So we have a diminished triad. So we have A diminished, and our fifth is in the bass. So we have A diminished 6-4, or we have A diminished E flat in the bass. Okay, there we go, folks. That is labeling inverted triads.